Previously,
what am I doing here? I'm gone! That is a joke, man. This organization holds no one accountable for anything. I didn't hear from Dorian today. I didn't hear from Melnyk.
Be one that Anderson should have unless he's got some traffic, but from 40 feet out, Anderson's got to make that stop.
None of the numbers are good with his team right now. Ottawa has gone into a deep nosedive and they've yet been able to pull out of it.
These are not good times for the Ottawa Senators, and these basically means, the last 8 months or so. At least the Sens got rid of Mike Hoffman in a trade this morning. That at least calmed the question of how the Karlssons and Hoffman, his fiance, could coexist in Ottawa.
It just adds another layer to what the hell is going on with Pierre Dorion and the Senators. Like, what? I get what you did here, and I know why you did it, but just more question marks surrounding this team.
The Ottawa Senators trade their captain, Erik Karlsson, to the San Jose Sharks.
The lines that the Sens are prepared to throw out to the meat grinder are as followed. Matt Duchene, Ryan Dzingel, rookie Alex Formenton, Mikkel Bodker, Bobby Ryan, Mark Stone, Chris Tierney, Colin White, Magnus Pjarvi, Max McCormick, Tom Pyatt, Zach Smith. The defensemen being Thomas Chabot, Cody Ceci, Mark Borowiecki, Dylan DeMello, Ben Harper, Chris Weinman, and Max Lajoie. 7 defensemen, a Guy Boucher special. And the goalies, of course, are Craig Anderson. Brady Tkachuk is hurt for the time being because peak Sens, wonderful. The Sens start their season at home against the Hawks. A story that's emerged has been Maxime Lajoie, a 5th round pick in 2016, whose stock has grown during the preseason and has made the camp as a 21-year-old. The Sens and Hawks trade goals, but after that, it's a youngster who gets both his first goal and an assist, all in the first period. Something to look out for the Sens. But unfortunately, the Sens do go down in overtime. Even with the semi-favorable results, that's not the real true story of this game. The Sens home opener only registered about 15,000 fans, and the Melnyk out protest is starting to look very much real. The Sens would win their next game against the Leafs, a game where honestly, the Thomas Chabot breakout game for the whole world to see. 2 goals and assists, including this incredible move which would stand as a game winner. Now the Chabot of last year was decent, albeit sheltered, and wasn't tasked with any real offensive responsibilities. But this year, with all the pressure to be a #1 defenseman on this Sens team, so far, in these first 2 games, he's thrived. The Sens don't really have a support man for him, the closest being the reliable and stay-at-home defenseman DeMello, or the absolute wild card of Cody Ceci. Everyone else is an intriguing option, but magic being at that. Maxime Lajoie has all of a sudden been a major part of this decor, which goes to show how weak it is. The next game against the Bruins, season drop hit 6-3, but Brady Tkachuk did make his return, which is awesome, and looked okay, albeit lanky for someone who we're told was bigger than Matthew Tkachuk. The Senators go back home to Ottawa and play at Philadelphia. The second home game of the season only seeing depressing small 13,000 fans, a sign the Melnyk out protest working as intended. Ottawa drops that game, with a small caveat being Brady Tkachuk scoring his first 2 goals of his career. But then all of a sudden, they win 3 straight against a Dallas team that made the playoffs, a Habs team that would miss the playoffs by 1 point, and a mediocre Kings team. Not bad teams. Not all of a sudden. The record is 4-2-1. The stat sheet had an unexpected twist. Chris Tierney, yes, Chris Tierney, a throw-in in the Karlsson trade, was leading the team in scoring with 9 points in 7 games. Tied with him? Thomas Chabot. That's when you really start to see the allure of Chabot. Trading Karlsson has unlocked what looked like a budget clone of him. Karlsson is still the way, and I mean way better offensive threat, but Chabot's skating almost looks like him. Almost more smoother than Karlsson. Anyone who watched him carry Team Canada in 2017 World Juniors, logging about 30 minutes a night and winning tournament MVP, already had an idea of what we could have seen. And now we see right now. Yes, the Karlsson trade still hurts astronomically, but for the time being, it hurts just a little less. Maxime Lajoie with 7 points in 7 games, and DeMello with 5 points, and being a pretty good stay-at-home defenseman. That trade, albeit still a horrible trade, looking kinda decent. The Sens analytics aren't even all that bad either. A 50% expected goals for percentage at 5v5 indicates a team that could hang with about anybody in the league, and their actual goals percentage being about 54% shows that the team is playing pretty good and not being partially lucky like past years. Now, is that because the schedule so far has been pretty easy with them only playing 3 playoff teams in that span? Sure, but the way this team finished off 2018, the summer, the trades, all the negatives around this team, this stretch to start the year off is crucial in getting morale back into a demoralized fan base. Fuck. 4 straight losses, only one being an OT, but against good teams. Then we head into a game in Arizona. Different from past years, the Coyotes are actually a decent team. A very structured team with no real superstar or game breakers, but have a ton of depth. Similar to the 2017 Sens, honestly. But the Coyotes possess elite defense, great goaltending, and elite penalty kill, which would all be shown in the first period where the Yotes jump out to a 3-0 lead, including this one on the power play for Ottawa.
Played away and again cleared all the way down.
And it goes in! Derek Stepan!
Mike Conley will be pulled, waived the next day, and still to this day hasn't played a game since. This was his last NHL moment. Alex Formenton scores his first goal. It was a career, cool, that's good, I guess. Jesus Christ. But the embarrassment, as much was shown during the game, wasn't the highlight of this game. It was what happened after the game. Of course, any team this would happen to, it would have to be Ottawa. Sens players were caught shit-talking everything about this team in an Uber, from the way they play to assistant coach Marty Raymond to the PK formation. Now, is this some sort of foreign topic where players all live in harmony and never let their frustrations out? Of course not. This happens all the time. But the fact that it was leaked via Uber dashcam where the driver sold the footage to the Ottawa Sun, and B, it was Ottawa of all teams, the current biggest joke in the NHL, even before this, and the team that's had issues with maintaining locker room excellence. This was just a calamity of errors. Also, this is around the time where the Sens analytics took a nosedive, going from a plus 50% in expected goals for percentage to the mid to low 40s. Now the Sens are heading for utter disaster. The Sens trade some wins and some losses, including a 9-2 demolition to hand of the Sabres, and at 20 game mark, the Sens sit at 9-8-3. Honestly, not a bad record, but not a record you think would contend for a playoff spot. But in a season where they don't have their first round pick, they don't really have anything to particularly lose for. So being mediocre is not a bad consolation. And honestly, it would be a nice morale boost knowing that the team isn't punting a potential franchise player in Jack Hughes to the Avalanche. The Sens' better players have played like they're better players. Matt Duchene is having a career year with 27 points in 21 games, on pace for about 100 points on this mediocre trash team. But alongside him is the absolute emerging Mark Stone with 24 points in 21 games, including a plus 10 rating, all while being tasked with shutting down the top competition and playing with 2 rookies in Colin White and Brady Tkachuk. There was a reason the Sens called him as a future captain after Karlsson. He was the face of the franchise for the time being, a guy that was drafted in the 6th round and developed through the systems. If the Sens aren't able to get him and Matt Duchene locked up, it'll be a disaster. But for the time being, we're not worried about that. Thomas Chabot has logged on nicely since we talked about him earlier, with 24 points in just 21 games, with 23 minutes a game. He is putting up numbers that we didn't see since 2017 Karlsson. Beyond the big 3, the supporting cast chipped in. Chris Tierney quietly added 17 points as a secondary playmaker, Ryan Dzingel having his breakout year with 9 goals in 19 games, and a fresh-faced Brady Tkachuk burst onto the scene with 10 points just 10 games before his injury. And with the physical presence he brought, something the Sens have been looking for a forward since the days of Chris Neal, it brought hope for what could be the future captain of this team. And even prospects are doing good, as Drake Batherson made his NHL debut and scored on his first shot. The Ottawa Senators look almost respectable. Before Core and Chabot were the highlights, but the rest of the team was a giant mess. Arguably the main reason why this team isn't as good as the top end might indicate. After Chabot and DeMello, it was a calamity. Cody Ceci was still somehow slotted as a top 4 defenseman, and he was nowhere near ready for a top 4 defenseman role. He may never be. Cody Ceci, from the eye test and the analytics, is a walking disaster. He is not smart, he cannot handle the puck, he is an okay skater but has trouble with moving the puck. His shot is awful. He has no playmaking ability whatsoever. He is just a body, but for whatever reason, he is playing more minutes some nights than DeMello. Chris Weidman at this point can't play defense. And with the injury he sustained last year, his offense has regressed. So there's really no role for him in his lineup. Mark Voretsky has always been a physical defenseman, but even on this team, he is thrusted into a top 5 role at some points. Lajoie has obviously regressed. I mean, it was inevitable, but he has regressed from unplayable at this point. He does go down with an injury eventually, but the Cinderella run for what could have been a decent prospect is now over. And with that, other than the top 2 guys, the Sens have the worst defense in the NHL, bar none. And the goalies. Oh my goodness, the goalies. Craig Anderson at this point just isn't good. Yes, the team in front of him is awful, but even going off by G-Sacks, he isn't giving them an opportunity to win. It is really sad too, because this is the same guy who stole playoff series and nearly brought the team its first cup ever in 2017. But by this point, the tank for what is a 39-year-old is now empty. The Sens don't have an active backup because Mike Condon. So the Sens would go out and try to sign 35-year-old Mike McKenna, who is a career AHL journeyman. It went as well as expected. Just a calamity of errors. A disaster. But the bigger picture is this. Even with all the hardships, all the drama, the Sens this year, in their first 20 or so games, look way better, both on the ice and other than the Ubergate incident, off the ice. There's a weird freshness about this team. Maybe it's because of Matt Duchene's emergence as an elite scorer, or Mark Stone's emergence as a future captain of this team, or Thomas Chabot's emergence, or whatever. There is almost a level of clarity about this team. You know this team isn't going to be good. You know this team isn't going to compete for a cup, or a playoff spot, mind you. But the drama of Karlsson is over. All the Sens have to do now is watch the team grow, and hope that God, Melnyk, and Koch can convince both Duchene and Stone to resign. And along with emergence of Ryan Dzingel, who has now been part of discussion to resign along with Duchene and Stone. Yes, every game may be chaos, but it was the chaos you want from a hockey team. Entertainment, and not despair. Now the Sens have a pretty meh record to this point, but it isn't awful, and not awful is good for this team. I mean, they're not exactly tanking for anything because they don't have a first round pick. So being mediocre is not the end of the world. In fact, it's actually a pretty good place to be for this team. The hope for this team is to maintain the level of play till the end of the year and start their true rebuild in the 2019-20 season. That's a hope for this team. But like last year, at this very moment, almost to a T, this team collapses on themselves. 4 straight losses, then 3 straight wins, including a 2-goal comeback against the Flyers, where Duchene scored this game winner.
The pass is knocked down, a turnover, and look out, here come the Senators. The shot by Duchene. Save, rebound, he scores! Gets it out of the air, and by Stowars.
Then a few losses, then a win against the Sharks in Karlsson's debut back in Ottawa. A very emotional game for most fans, but the Sens were still around the 500 mark going into Game 30, somewhere where the Sens weren't last year. Ottawa was firmly out of playoff spot at this point, as the teams like Montreal and Boston were just eyeing for that divisional spot with the Leafs and Tampa, oh my god. But them being around that wildcard spot, just competing for it, would be a nice breath of fresh air. But for the time being, while this is all going on, the Sens would have to move the roster around, offloading Chris Weidman for a 6th round pick. Now, there is some speculation that him being blacklisted from the team because he was in the passenger seat of the Ubergate incident. That's just rumors. I mean, Chris Weidman was borderline unplayable at times for this team. And freeing up a roster spot for a guy like Wolanin, who was killing in the AHL, is more than sound reasoning. And finally getting a respectable backup for Craig Anderson and Anders Nielsen, who was a meh goalie, but meh is pretty good on this team. But the moves that made the headlines were the ones that didn't happen. The Sens still have to re-sign likes of Stone, Duchene, Dzingel, and even Cody Ceci. And all fronts point to there being an impasse on all 4 of them. Duchesne, Dzingel being eligible for extension now, and Stone and Ceci being extension eligible on January 1st make things a little bit complicated. The rumors stem from Melnyk and Cole pointing towards a full teardown rebuild, all 4 being at the stage of their careers where they don't want to really be in a full stage rebuild. And even Melnyk and Dorian have made rumors that they don't think they fit in a rebuild, which is weird since Stone and Duchesne aren't exactly ancient. They're in their primes, yes, but they can age with the core. We'll have to wait about 3 months until a decision is made to the trade deadline day. The Sens are still respectable. I mean, at this point, we're just gonna keep going. Let's just hope for our sakes it continues. Oh shit. At the 54 game mark, the Sens sit at 19, 29, and 5. 2 months ago, there was a glimmer of hope of them not only competing for mediocrity, but also being able to re-sign all 4 of those guys. And Ottawa would not have to punt away Jack Hughes of Colorado, who, by the way, are really good. But now, in February, none of that is happening. In fact, the complete opposite is happening. The contract rumors went from cautiously optimistic to null. No hope of re-signing. And there is a 100% chance that all 4 are going to be traded eventually. And the reality of them being sent out is becoming truer every day. Literally, the top 3 scorers on this team, Duchesne, Stone, Dzingel, are all going to be dealt. And with Chabot missing about a month with an injury, a stretch where the Sens had both a 8 and a 5 game losing streak, Ottawa looked borderline unwatchable. Also, doesn't help that Brady Tkachuk hit an NCAA rookie wall hard. It's normal, it happens to a lot of guys, and Brady had that happen at the worst time. At this very moment, the Sens are dead last in the league. The glimmer of hope is gone. We're at DEFCON 1. Worse than rock bottom. Prepare yourselves. It's gonna be a long video. On top of all the on-ice chaos, the off-ice dilemma was at large. The Sens' attendance woes are at concerning levels last year. This year, it's an unavoidable disaster. The Sens will finish the season bottom 5 in attendance and only ahead of teams like Arizona and Carolina, really? And the Sens aren't exactly doing anything to deal with attendance. I mean, Melnyk can't shut up. But the Melnyk protests are out in full force. The fans are speaking with their wallets, and rightfully so. The Sens win their next 2 games, including a 5-2 win against a really good Jets team. Now, the Sens aren't exactly making any headway into a playoff spot or being a passable hockey team, but it's nice as a fan of the team to at least watch a win. But these past few weeks, reality has set in that both Duchesne, Stone, and Dzingel are going to be traded in the coming weeks, and any of these games will be the last time we'll see them in a Sens uniform. Contract negotiations have stalled for a while now. The final offers to all 3 guys have been denied. The reason? 0 trade protections. This isn't an Ottawa issue. This isn't an issue of them not wanting to be in Ottawa for a rebuild. It's that they don't know if they're wanted in Ottawa by upper management, which is so baffling. It's the same issue we had with Karlsson last year. The refusal of a no move or trade clause is a baffling decision for a small market team like Ottawa, when you realize this team has no upper edge on teams like LA or Florida or New York. There is no reason why we should be playing hardball with these guys. But alas, Ottawa has stand pat. They're going for a full rebuild, led by Colin White, Brady Tkachuk, Thomas Chabot, and the hope of prospects like Drake Batherson, Alex Formenton, Logan Brown, and co. But wouldn't it be logical to keep at least Mark Stone? Dzingel is selling high, and Duchesne is a guy you just trade for and just want to sell off. Sunk cost fallacy. But Stone, a potential successor to Karlsson as a captain, who's kind of young, a homegrown superstar. He lives with Brady Tkachuk, for God's sake. He's his landlord. He's not that old. He's 27. Let's say his rebuild takes 5 years. He'll be 32. A 32-year-old Mark Stone could easily be a headliner for this team right now. But alas, the Sens don't agree. Ottawa would lose the next 2 games, then win an OT game against the Jets again. I mean, this is a good Jets team. Why the fuck they keep losing to us? Then get into an absolute firefight with the Blackhawks. Then, the next game, are shut out against a really bad Devils team. That Devils game will be the last game for Mark Stone, Ryan Dzingel, and Matt Duchesne as an Ottawa Senator. The Sens will healthy scratch Stone against the Flames, and the next 2 games before the next game, Stone and Duchesne would both be dealt to the Blue Jackets in separate trades. Duchesne fetching a prospect Vitaly Abramov and lower tier prospect Jonathan Davidson, and a first along with a conditional first round pick, if he resigns. Spoiler, he did not. And Duchesne fetches Anthony Duclair and 2 second-round picks. Overall, not a bad return with the leverage they had, especially for Dzingel. But the Sens set out a goal of trading the best players for draft picks. And in that sense, the Sens were successful. Then after the loss against the Flames, where Braykochuk scored against his brother, the depressing and inevitable happened. There seems to be a difference in tone with Duchesne and Dzingel versus Mark Stone. I said this earlier, but Duchesne has no real pedigree in Ottawa. He was here for just over a year, and was part of someone who was losing years for Ottawa. Dzingel, yes, a nice story, but he wasn't a superstar. He was a top 6 forward having a career year, maybe having an unsustainable year, so selling high made sense. But Mark Stone, on the other hand, was different. A 6th round pick who burst in the scene in 2015, a year where Sens fans remember as the Hamburger years, but other than Hammond, Mark Stone was the best forward on that team. Hell, you can make this argument he's the best skater on that team during that stretch. He was unbelievable, and ever since then has been slowly and surely breaking out to a superstar. This year, with playing with 2 rookies in Braykochuk and Colin White, he was over a point a game while being a Selke candidate. It's not just his defensive game or his offensive game. His leadership is paramount. His sellies, man, it's everything about the guy. He's a guy you want on your team. A perfect mentor for a rebuilding team. But no matter how much logic there was to keeping him, and no matter how many reports we got of all the Sens and Stone working out a deal, the smokescreen would eventually reveal itself and how just far apart they were on keeping this marriage up together. Mark Stone was never gonna stay. He was never gonna re-sign. And the trade we see today was always a likely outcome. The likely outcome when he filed for arbitration in 2018. It was a likely outcome when he signed a 1-year deal that walked him straight to UFA status. Now the stress of being a Sens fan continues because the return for Mark Stone, mind you, Mark Stone had just signed, got traded to with an 8-year deal, is underwhelming. Mark Stone would see himself as a Vegas Golden Knight for a package around super highly talented defensive prospect Erik Brannstrom, Oscar Lindberg, and a 2nd round pick. The lack of a 1st round pick is astonishing, but getting a top 5 league-wide prospect in Erik Brannstrom more than makes up for it. He is immediately the best prospect on the Sens right now. But even Brannstrom, for all of his pedigree, does not make up the loss of Mark Stone for the Sens. But for now, the Sens have a season to finish. A 31st place standing is all but inevitable, unfortunately. But at least the Belleville Sens look pretty exciting. And along with prospects in college like Josh Norris and Joy Decord, players in OHL like Formanton, and players in Belleville like Wolanin, Batherson, Logan Brown, Vitaly Abramov, and Phil Gustafson, the Sens prospect pool isn't bad at all. Even with all the turmoil, we're not done here yet, Sens fans. We're not done here yet. There's still one more gut punch left for Ottawa fans. During this entire time, I mean this entire season, the Sens and the NCC have been negotiating to build a downtown arena the team so desperately needs. Since 2015, mind you, negotiations have been going relatively smoothly, at least as smooth as a Melnyk-led negotiation would possibly be. But in 2018, they hit a halt. And about a week after the Stone trade, both sides sent out lawsuits to the other side. The lawsuits stemmed from the failure of the partnership, blah blah blah. There's a lot of mumbo jumbo. Essentially, for the time being, there is no downtown arena. The other news of embarrassment off the ice and on the ice, Ooh Brigade, the choking baby onesies, those could be sins we can laugh at, but this, the whole concept of hockey in Ottawa, is at risk. There not might be a Senators team in Ottawa in 5 years if they don't get their act together. This is huge news. The Sens don't exactly get much better to end the year. The highlight is beating the Leafs twice in a 2-week span, in home games that look like away crowds of the deaf community. During the losing, a week after Dorian told the media he wouldn't do it, the Sens would go ahead and fire Guy Boucher anyways, and promote interim head coach Mark Crawford as head coach. Guy Boucher was never a coach that could handle a rebuild. He stopped his 131 this year for a new system, but the outcome didn't change. And he was horrible at development, often benching Tkachuk and Colin White, even Chabot at some points, to send a message. I mean, look at the team. They're not the issue. But it's weird to do it this late in the year when all's lost. Why not do it in November or December or last year? Another chaotic element was the announcement a week prior about keeping Boucher till the season's end, only to fire him. A brass already under fire for incompetence now is looked at as untrustworthy. Can this godforsaken team do anything right? The season is over, thank you God, but they do finish in last place unfortunately. Let's go through this season highlights. There were some positives honestly. Thomas Chabot is an elite defenseman, and only 22 years old, he registers 55 points in only 70 games, and at times carried a sub-NHL D-core to wins. There is hope of him being someone who could carry this Sens team on his back to a playoff spot in a few years, and a number 1 defenseman in this league. Brady Tkachuk, even though did hit a wall at some points, had a great rookie year. 22 goals and made his physical presence known, all at only 19 years old. He looks like a headliner for a Sens forward core, which at this very moment is lacking a little bit. And same with Colin White, who had a pretty good rookie year himself, but was stapled on line with Brady Tkachuk and Mark Stone. Chris Tierney, 50 points is not bad for a middle sixer. I mean, he did get ample opportunity to do it, but still, not bad. Anthony Duclair, who was a throw-in in the Dzingel trade, was not half bad, generating chemistry with Tkachuk and would show what made him such an exciting prospect back in the day. Anders Nilsson finished with a .914 save percentage as the backup / starter at this time because Anderson is old. He's old. And is a nice stopgap until one of the Sens goalie prospects emerges. Speaking of prospects, the pool had quite the selection. Drake Batherson impressed being above a point a game in the AHL. Logan Brown is under a point a game. Nick Paul, if you still call him a prospect, is there somehow too. I don't know. Phil Gustafson struggled in his Belleville debut season, but he is still young, so there is some hope. In the .887 save percentage though, yeesh. And players like Josh Norris and Joey Tagore, who came over from Arizona State and did things in his debut, don't look at the score. And with the new additions that brought him up at Brandstrom, there were futures to look at. And with the Blue Jackets pick being in the teens, the opportunity to select a decent prospect was there. But as a Sens fan, all I can say is thank God. This season, the drama with Stone, the arena drama, Ubergate, and all the bullshit, it's over. And the solace is that your pick falls to pick 4. Thank you, God! Colorado does not get Jack Hughes, which is a massive breath of fresh air for Sens fans. Ottawa was a decent scoring team, being 17th in the league. Not great, but it's a Sens, so it's decent. Although a lot of scoring is now gone, but by far the most glaring issue was the defense. Last place in goals against. This team's defense was truly a disaster and needed major surgery. Even with the emergence of Chabot and defensive play of DeMello, it just wasn't NHL caliber, and waiting on prospects isn't gonna fix that. The Sens' goaltending wasn't much better, as the Sens led the league in goals against above average by a large margin, had the worst goals differential in the league. But the underlying tone among Sens fans is that if this defense gets better, then the goalie should be by comparison. Immediately after the season conclusion, the Sens let go of the interim coach Mark Crawford and go coach hunting. The candidates would include Patrick Waugh, former Sens head coach Jacques Martin, Rick Bowness, and Leafs assistant coach DJ Smith. Weird how a lot of these choices are defensive heavy options when the team defense core is awful, but nonetheless the Sens would go with up-and-comer DJ Smith from the Toronto Maple Leafs. The positives is that he's a development coach, one that could bring the young players up to the big leagues and develop them. I guess that's the job of every head coach, but we are told DJ Smith is really good at that. He was the defensive coach for Toronto, and let's see how they did. Oh my god. Melnyk in April went on a radio show and essentially shit on the Leafs and their defense, and then promptly hired the guy in charge of their defense. This man is just a walking fucking idiot. Actually, you know what? Reading the whole interview, this man said some wild shit. Let's just read some of the quotes. You don't do a rebuild with a short-term view. You've got to have, and it's tough in sports, a 5-year outlook, and if you don't, all you're doing is patching up. I know a team that you know that's done it for 53 years. They've been selling out, but all they do is they've been patching up. Finally, they collapsed, the team. We've got to do a rebuild. But the mistakes were made, and somebody forgot about defense. My brother in Christ, we are the worst defensive team in the league. Why are we talking? And best, and I mean best of all, the Sens will begin a 5-year run of unparalleled success, where the team will spend close to the salary cap on 2021-2025 and win a Stanley Cup. Can this guy just shut up? Anyway, the Sens wouldn't do much from now until the draft, just re-signing Anders Nilsson and Marcus Hogberg to a 2-year deal and Duclair to a 1-year deal. Now we enter the draft, we have to wait a little bit longer than most teams who are this bad need to because, oh, the Sens, while to the Avalanche who made the playoffs, won a round, select Bowen Byram 4th overall. And now at pick 19, the Sens would select Finnish defenseman Lassi Thompson, a right-hand defenseman who is an offensive defenseman, just what we need. Who best resembles Tony DeLangelo without the rhetoric. But the real steal doesn't come until round 2, where the Sens will select Shane Pinto with the first pick in the second round. A reach, but one that lead amateur scout Trent Mann literally put his job on the line for, and in a few years, he'd be proven right. Other picks would include 6'8" goalie Matt Solgaard and overrated Mark Kastelik. As decent as a draft you could possibly have with little draft picks the Sens had possessed. Then on July 1st, after signing 2 former Leafs in Ron Hainsey and Tyler Ennis, the Ottawa Senators make a rather perplexing trade. Even after all the moves and all the turmoil, sorry-ass Cody Ceci was still on the team, and still an RFA. His ask being as high as 2018 $6 million while still being turbo dog shit was not a recipe for disaster. Totally not. So the Sens finally decided to kill a CC air in Ottawa, but instead of just qualifying him, they decided to trade him along with Ben Harper, AHLer Aaron Lachuk, and a 3rd round pick to the Leafs for Connor Brown, Nikita Zaitsev, and 2 more Leaf players who I cannot be bothered to mention. Zaitsev being the defenseman here, a right-handed defenseman, which is solid, and he is objectively better than CC, but the devil is in the detail. He is in year 2 of a 7-year contract at $4.5 million a season, and his last 2 seasons seeing him regress from a solid rookie year doesn't give much indication of improvement. In fact, out of any top 4 deployed defenseman in the league, he was the 6th worst in expected goals for just 2.4 in the whole year. He was also far and away the least efficient shooter on the Leafs, just launching pucks on net when he was quite possibly next to the best goal scorer in the league in Austin Matthews to just pass a puck to. That's to say this player is god awful, and 7 more years at top 4 money is a poison pill contract, even if he is slightly better than CC. But the supposed sweetener of this deal is Connor Brown, who in a small sample size was quite good and a very versatile player. He just couldn't crack a pretty stacked Leafs lineup. But on this team, he can be a top 6er that desperately need defensive responsible wingers. But the hope that Brown being as good as he can be can't counter the anchor of Zaitsev's terrible contract is a tough ask. And giving a 3rd round pick is a weird thing to do. And the worst part is Zaitsev is probably the team's best right-handed defenseman behind DeMelo. He is likely gonna play upwards of 20 minutes a game, especially with the new coach who happens to be his former defensive coach in Toronto, DJ Smith. These moves indicate DJ Smith has more roster control than other Sens coaches have had before. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we'll soon see. The offseason will be more quiet. A small swap for veteran and longtime Sens player Zach Smith for Artem Anisimov, and a cap dump of sorts on the LTR deal of Ryan Callahan for Mike Condon. A move that perfectly encapsulates what the Sens are doing right now. Try to reach a cap floor without actually have to pay salaries, as the Callahan deal is covered by insurance. Thus saves Melnyk a lot in actual dollars. And I guess the biggest move of the offseason so far is signing Colin White to a 6-year deal at $4.5 million a year. A trend that ironically Ottawa started is to sign young players to long-term deals to hopefully buy out before they blow up. Although I don't really see how much you're saving on Colin White given his 6-year deal at $4.5 million when, yes, he was pretty good as a center, but he had Mark Stone beside him. He's probably never going to develop into a headliner center, maybe a really good third-line center or a decent second-line center, but I don't know how much he can develop after that. That much term though is pretty rough, and the Sens would repeat this same tactic in September with their soon-to-be RFA, and this time it makes a whole lot more sense. Inking Thomas Chabot to an 8x8. Now this makes way more sense. Chabot has a chance to be a Norris candidate soon, and inking him long term before he blows up here is logical. Unlike Colin White, we've seen Chabot elevate himself without superior talent, so the rationale is on point. But with the 2 signings, it sends a message to the fans. We can keep our talent. And the notion of us being a farm team for the league is hopefully far-fetched. Before training camp, Christopher Landon fell on the ice and messed up his shoulder pretty bad. He's out for the next 4 to 6 months, so now a decently weak defensive squad is looking even weaker. The forwards for the 2020 season are as follows: Tkachuk, White, Brown, Duclair, Chris Tierney, Bobby Ryan, Tyler Ennis, Anisimov, Batherson, with rookie Philip Schlappick, JG Pajot, and enforcer / Austin Matthews hate guy, Scott Sabrin. The defense is Chabot, and for some godforsaken reason, Nikita Zaitsev at the top pair. Like, I know you try to spread out the D pairings because having the two best defensemen on the same pair might be a little bit redundant because the rest of the defense squad is awful, but it's Zaitsev, he's not that good. And then second pair is Brandstrom and Hainsey, with Brandstrom making the team out of camp, and then Mark Borowski and for some reason Dylan DeMel in the third pair. And the starters are Craig Anderson, the backup as Anders Nilsson. The Sens would start off the season in Toronto and immediately Brady Tkachuk opens the scoring, and even though the Sens start off hot, Toronto will prevail with a Matthews game-winning goal. But the point of this game was how every line did decent except of Anisimov, Batherson, and his line were a combined -11 that game. Just a purely awful display from all three of them, especially considering not a single forward on the team was even a minus. Also, another note was DJ's insistence in playing Nikita Zaitsev top pair minutes with Chabot instead of the reliable DeMello. But the winning wouldn't come until game 4, which funny enough came against a team that set the league NHL record for most wins in a season, the Tampa Bay Lightning. And in the first 10 games, they were only able to muster up 2 wins, one against a Red Wings team that will finish the season with the worst record by points percentage in the cap era. Remember the Melnyk outtrends from last year? The sub 15,000 crowds? Well, let's say that this year those crowds would be barn burners compared to this year. The home opener only seeing 15,000 fans. The next game against St. Louis, the defending Stanley Cup champions, the crowd attendance was a horrific 9,204. In the first 10 games, the Sens won't see crowds go above 11,500 and we'll see another sub 10,000 crowd attendance. And we'll see yet another sub 10,000 crowd attendance in the next game in Karlsson's return to Ottawa. Now you can say that this is fan apathy and this is a cycle that comes with a losing team. Fan attendance drops, and with the arena location being a part of the equation, it is a logical conclusion. But even teams in bad hockey markets that are outright tanking don't see crowds like this. The 2015 Coyotes had a crowd attendance of 13,345 fans a game. The Tankathon Sabres had an average attendance of 18,580. The Panthers team that tanked their souls away for Ekblad had an attendance of 14,500. The Sens this year will finish the season with a crowd attendance of about 12,000 fans a game. This would be among the worst attendance in league history. The attendance have been dropping since 2014, ironically the year Sens fans were first introduced to Melnyk's fury with the contract bungling of Alfredson, but this has hit an all-time low. But for the protesters, this is a positive sign, a sign that fans are standing behind the Melnyk out protest, and it's working. The noise that Canadian market had attendance this putrid is bringing eyes to the malpractice going on, and for the time being, instead of mocking and vitriol like the Panthers and Coyotes fans faced, the consensus is that this is a stand of positivity among Sens fans. 9 games into the year, we have our first trade. The Sens, who need help on the wings badly, as they finally decided to end the Drake Bathurst experiment, sending him down to the AHL, decided to bring up Nick Paul from the AHL and acquire forward Vaslav Nemesnikov from the Rangers for a 4th round pick. Nemesnikov, who was actually a point a game when acquired, would be a middle sixer the Sens would desperately need. He should slot nicely on the Anisimov line, and as for Paul, he jumps out the gate swing, scoring 2 goals against the Sharks in game 11, and finally showing Sens fans why he was a marquee piece coming back in the Spezza trade. It's taken a while, but finally, Nick Paul is an NHLer, and a decent one at that. The first 10 games, and wow, Connor Brown is pretty good. No goals but 8 assists and a +5 on a team with 2 wins. But it's not just the offense. He's like the ultimate Swiss Army knife player, plays on both the power play and the penalty kill. He's a key component on the power play because he is quite possibly the only capable puck handler as a forward right now, since Brady Tkachuk has started off the year with only 3 points. And is also among the top players in the league in the penalty kill with him and JG Pajot. But speaking on Pajot, he's fully broken out this year with 6 points and 3 goals and a +9. Similar to Brown, a player on the power play and penalty kill, but is also at a 50% face-off rate. Same with Chris Tierney, who's at 60%. And then there's Chabot, who was playing an astronomical amount of minutes. In the game against the Rangers, he will play 30 minutes and 15 seconds. All in regulation, a 4-1 loss. This decor is beyond turbo dog shit without him. so DJ Smith knows it, double shifting him with DeMelo and Zaitsev at some points. At this rate, they're gonna kill him. The Sens would trade wins and losses for the greater part of November, including a 3-game winning streak, and because of how dog shit the East is this year, this season with a record of 11-11-1 and only 1 point of a playoff spot. Now, are the playoffs realistic? Not a chance. But for many Sens fans, this stretch of hockey is the most carefree, most relaxing stretch of games they've had since 2017. Now, is the team any good? Not really. JD Pageau is shooting out of his mind at 24% and all of a sudden has 13 goals in 22 games. And Anthony Duclair has all of a sudden emerged himself as a top paired winger. Brady has finally come back from a slump for the rest of the team. And holy shit, Pageau's a plus 17. What the fuck? Also, Mark Borowiecki has all of a sudden become a super reliable NHLer, previous being just a 7th defenseman. He now has 9 points in 22 games and is a plus 8 in 60 minutes a game. Mind you, he is a 7th defenseman. The only real explanation is being paired up with DeMelo, who has all of a sudden transformed him. But even with the relative positivity, there is a piece of news that's rather commendable, but sad at the same time. Bobby Ryan, one of the few tenured players from the team in 2017, has entered an NHL's player assistance program for alcohol abuse to combat his demons. He will recover and play, don't worry, but for now, he's going to be out for a while. The Sens proceed to lose the next 5 games, all while scoring less than 3 goals. The lack of high-end talent on the roster is appalling. Even the enticing pieces like Tkachuk and White aren't at the level yet where they can create for themselves, and now we're seeing a decrease in their production. It's not as noticeable on Tkachuk, but it's especially concerning on Colin White, who has been dreadful this year with only 4 points in 15 games. The future second liner has now been passed behind by Pageau, Tierney, even Nick Paul. The Eric Branson experiment finally ends at 20 games, and even though he looks completely outmatched, poising the worst on-ice goals percentage at 39%, only ahead of Zaitsev. But he is still young and 20 years old. Though players he was ranked with just last year, Adam Foss, Quinn Hughes, and Makar all blowing up this year, kinda makes the Branstrom year kinda disappointing. The Sens then trade wins and losses for the rest of December once again. The offense isn't all that good apart from Pageau and Duclair playing both out of their minds. The defense isn't good, and the goaltending, which I haven't mentioned at all yet, is playing at very commendable levels. His stats may not look like it, but Anders Nilsson at some points is carrying this team. And along with Craig Anderson playing slightly better and 24-year-old rookie Marcus Hogberg playing decently, you can count the goalies to make quite a few saves you wouldn't expect. Fortunately, the defense is still so bad, there's nothing they can do at some points. I'm gonna talk more about Duclair and Pageau here, both of which are on pace for nearly 40 goals. Duclair reviving his career and potentially becoming a core member of this rebuild. And it's a little weird because even though he's only 24 years old, he has played on about 4 different teams. Pageau, though, is a little bit different. At 27, he's in the prime of his career, and judging by his nearly 20% shooting percentage, this is a one-off year, and he's probably going to regress to the 40-point third-line penalty specialist he's always been for most of his career. And with him only having 1 year left on his contract, the likelihood of the Sens re-signing him as opposed to cashing in is unlikely. It's a tough pill, seeing yet another homegrown Sen go, but this one stings a little less when you consider Sens are working with a positive strength rather than one of weakness when it comes to acquiring assets for him. The Sens also during his time call up a lot of younger players, Batherson, Logan Brown, Philip Schlappick, Abramov, and Andreas Anglin, just to see what they have. Some emerge like Batherson, who immediately looks significantly better than he did when he first started off this year, but others like Logan Brown just look lost out there. The former lottery pick, one that Pierre Dorian traded a single 3rd round pick to move up 1 pick for, hasn't dominated like many hope he would. And seeing players like McAvoy and Chikrin do really good, especially the putrefulness of the decor, it's kind of sad to see at least. Sens would go on a 9-game losing streak. Offense dries up, including Duclair and Pageau, who combined for 1 goal in that span. Connor Brown now being the only saving grace on this team. It's a tank job. The Sens fans haven't really seen a tank since like 1995. The Sens have never been really a bad team ever in the 21st century. There have been years when they were pretty bad, but this is a whole nother level. This is worse than last year at this point. Now is a great time to look at the inferno going on in Belleville right now, because oh boy, the slogan of this year for the Senators was "the kid's all right." I think that quote should have been given to Belleville because what they're doing over there is mind-boggling. Josh Norris, Drake Batherson, Logan Brown, and Rudolph Balcers, all under 22, will finish the year in the AHL on a point per game. Alex Formenton will finish with 53 points 61 games as a 20-year-old. Branston will finish the year with 23 points in 27 games at 20 years old as a defenseman. But Phil Gustafson, he's had a rough transition. There's still plenty of time as he's only 21 years old, but being passed up in starts by Joey Decord and Hogberg is not a good tell. Also, I want to add a small detail about this season. This small detail will change the whole complexity of this rebuild. Remember the conditional first round pick the Sens got in the Karlsson trade? At first, many people assumed to be in the bottom 20. Well, some of these Sharks have completely imploded themselves this year and are among the worst teams in the league. At some points, worse than Ottawa. Thus, now the Sens not only have one first round pick in the top 5, they might have 2 top 5 picks. A massive, and I mean massive, jolt in the rebuild. And with the 2020 draft being talked about as one of the most stacked in recent memory, with the likes of Stützle, Byfield, and Lafreniere, the crown jewel, who's being hyped up as a generational prospect from Quebec, for the time being, with the current position of the Sens, hoping for losses may not be a bad thing. A win, then a loss, then a win, then a 6-game losing streak just already confirms what we know about this team. They make a trade for a puck-moving defenseman and Mike Riley, only giving up a 5th round pick. This move addressing the lack of any offense behind Chabot from the back end. It's not exactly moving the needle, but it helps with a major problem at the moment, which is Chabot playing way too many minutes. He is currently leading the league at 26 minutes a game, and on a game against Tampa Bay in December, he would play just under 38 minutes. The second highest ever recorded in a regular season game, only trailing Dennis Wideman 38.05 in a game where half his defense core was ejected 2 seconds into the game. Chabot didn't have such asterisk. There isn't really a logical reason why Chabot should be playing anywhere near the amount of minutes he's playing. In a season where they'd honestly be better off playing him 22 minutes a game to ensure more losses, they might kill Chabot. Then the Sens make an absolutely idiotic trade. The Sens would ship out the only positive in the team defensive core behind Chabot, a Dylan DeMello. A DeMello who this year has been a standout by most defensive metrics, and is one of the few players that doesn't drag Chabot down the depths of hell whenever he plays with him. So Winnipeg Jets for a 3rd round pick. The rationale being he was a pending free agent and he didn't fit the timeline. You'd think Pierre would prioritize the development of his number 1 defenseman, but nope, the rebuild must go on. Then the trade deadline would hit, and thus we'll see the last few pieces of the Sens go. First is Nemesnikov, who has been decent here. He's traded for a 4th round pick, which is the same as he was acquired for. The literal definition of a stopgap. Then the tough one. Pajot is a homegrown player to a T. He is from nearby Gatineau, is offloaded to the Isles for a monster return. A 1st round pick, a conditional 2nd round pick, and a 3rd round pick. Pajot in the past has been more of a 3rd line center, but this year exploded as he's finished the season in the Sens with 24 goals in 59 games, a 33 goal pace. His career high before was 19 goals in 2016, and an indicator of his unsustainable play with his shooting percentage at 18.5%. That to say that even though it was tough selling him off, especially considering he was one of the members of the 2017 Sens, it made a lot of sense here selling high. Then selling off Tyler Ennis for a 5th round pick, who honestly wasn't bad in Ottawa at all. But overall, not too much to make. The Sens decided to keep veterans like Anisimov and Chris Tierney and even Duclair, who has fallen off a cliff since his early January hot streak. Since January 1st, Duclair in 26 games has scored 2 goals, so he's fallen off. The rest of the season will be mostly grim hockey. Some bright news for Ottawa though. Bobby Ryan returns and made his NHL debut back from rehab, scoring a hat-trick at home. Overall, a nice feels to end the year. But you might be wondering why I'm ending the year off so early, as the Sens would play the last game of the year on March 13th in Game 71 against the Kings. Well, COVID happened, and it shut down not only the NHL, but the world. We don't know it yet. The fans, the players, the general managers, no one knows it yet. But the Ottawa Senators would not play a hockey game for another 10 months. As the season is coming to an unexpected close, let's talk about the positives of this season. First, very minimal off-ice drama. Yeah, the Sens suck and were mostly unwatchable for most of the year, but that was just on the ice. No teammate fights, no drama, no bullshit. Yeah, the product wasn't great, but it was dog shit. And that's it. No molten diarrhea on top of it. Second, the Sens prospects took a major step forward, almost all of them, especially in the AHL. I've mentioned the youngsters in the NHL, but the Belleville Sens were actually atop of the division before the stoppage, which showed that this team wasn't strictly individual, but a team effort. Brady Tkachuk showed that he could survive without Mark Stone, pretty much replicating his rookie year numbers on a substantially worse team. Unfortunately, that cannot be said for Colin White, who had a major regression to his game, and the stigma of him being a stolen Duchesne merchant might be stuck onto him for a while. Maybe locking him long term wasn't a great idea, Pierre Dorian. Connor Brown was nice and established himself as a really good middle sixer, but an unideal top sixer. But on this Sens team, you don't have much of a choice with him being the top 6. Nick Paul finally became a full-time NHLer after years of toiling away in the minors. A bottom sixer with his scoring touch is always needed in today's NHL, as seen by the deadline moves we see almost every year by contending teams. And the Sharks finished second to last in the whole league, which means the Sens are guaranteed not just 1, but 2 top 5 picks in what is looking like one of the more stacked drafts in the past 10 years. All in all, it's not a bad time to be a Sens fan, but Ottawa fans will need to wait and wait and wait for October to find any relevant news regarding the Sens, as that was when the draft lottery will be taking place. And in this, the Sens will get shafted. I mean, not only do both of the Sens picks fall, but a mystery team, one of which would be the New York Rangers, a team that was in the bubble, would win the first overall pick, and thus the relentless tank, one that the Sens faithful had penciled in as an opportunity to rectify the first francophone superstar in Dig and select Lafreniere, Ottawa would now need to look somewhere else. But with the Sens getting the 3rd overall pick, they were guaranteed one of Stützle, Byfield, or Lafreniere, all touted as franchise players, with Byfield getting Malkin comparisons, and Stützle getting the almost yearly drafted comparisons of Patrick Kane. The Sens would not have the option to choose, as they would get one of the ones that would fall after LA would make the pick, but in this scenario, Ottawa really can't lose. And as for the next pick, 5th overall, there is a lot of potential players to select. Lucas Raymond, Cole Perfetti, Jamie Drysdale, Marco Rossi, Raymond Alexander Holtz, and Askarov, the star goalie prospect. Now, it does suck that they're not getting Lafreniere, but picking not just 1 but 2 elite pieces is going to jolt this rebuild by a lot. And the 28th pick from the Isles, a pick much later than expected due to their excellence in the playoffs, isn't bad either. And they have a staggering 4 second round picks as well. 7 picks in the first 2 rounds is tremendous asset management. Let's see what they do. But before that, a quick rebrand. The Sens have rocked the 3D Centurion since 07, and even though at the time the Sens brass loved it, time has passed on and the goofy looking Roman is now a thing of the past. And with the 3rd jersey, especially the Heritage Classic jersey from 2018 being a fan favorite, it made sense for the Sens logo to move on to a different direction. With teams going to a throwback moniker, the Sens do the same. The Ottawa Senators will officially don their 90s look on both their home and away jerseys and change the logo to the 2D Centurion. A bit of a change to make it look more modern, the removal of the black sleeve on the road jersey and the golden sleeve on the home jersey, and the removal of the Ottawa Senators wording on the logo. But other than that, the logo largely remains the same as the 90s. Times are changing in Ottawa, and this time it's for the better. Ottawa would see Lafreniere go 1st overall, of course, and the Kings would opt to go with Byfield with a 2nd overall pick, thus setting the stage for them to select.
So happens to be a graduate of the University of Ottawa.
Here is the host of Jeopardy!
Is that Alex Trebek?
Alex Trebek!
Thank you, Johnny. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Jeopardy! Our category today is the NHL, and here is the clue for you. With the 3rd pick in the 2020 NHL Draft, the Ottawa Senators choose this player. The correct response? Who is Tim Stützle?
The obvious pick is made, and for the first time since they selected Jason Spezza back in 01, the Sens now have a truly elite, dynamic forward in the system. But now, on to the less obvious pick 5. With Detroit going with Raymond, there were options. If they wanted forwards, Rossi, Jack Quinn, Perfetti, and Holtz. For defense, Drysdale and Jake Sanderson, emerging as a top contender as well. Even if they wanted a high potential goalie, there was Yaroslav Askarov. But the Sens decided to go off the board with Jake Sanderson, a player who was at the time seen as a tier lower below the likes of Jamie Drysdale, and B, was a left-handed defenseman, which the Sens already had in Chabot and Brandstrom. Sanderson being more of a two-way defenseman than Chabot and Brandstrom, with the hope being Sanderson can develop his offensive game. But people lambasted this pick, stating the weirdness of ignoring the right-handed defenseman, stating that their best defenseman on their side is either JBD or Lassie Thompson. Regardless, the draft goes on with the 20th overall pick. The Sens select Ridley Gregg, a Nazem Kadri clone. If you're from the future, you already know this, but this draft was nearly generational for the Sens. Spoiler, all three are foundational pieces for the Sens today. If the Sens were just to end the offseason at this moment, the Sens would be sitting pretty. But no, Dorian had to goof it up. Again, on to day 2. The Sens have a glorious opportunity to select JJ Peterka. He even played with Tim Stützle at the World Juniors, but the Sens would go on to select Finnish power forward Robbie Arventi, who to this point hadn't done anything. But that wasn't the goof I was talking about. You see, Pierre Dorion is looking for a new goalie to hopefully take the next step, and he has his eyes on one Matt Murray. He isn't the same Murray that helped start this series. In fact, he's now below average and has been replaced by Tristan Jarry. But the hope is a change of scenery is beneficial. The trade being a second round pick and John Gruden, no, not that one, a decent price to pay, but with so many picks it made sense to add. No, the real goof was a contract immediately given out to him, because at the time Murray was a pending RFA. The Sens needed to negotiate a deal, and giving him a 4-year $6.25 million contract was not the game plan. For context, that would have made him the 5th highest paid goalie in the league, among the likes of Tuukka Rask, Marc-Andre Fleury, and more than the likes of John Gibson and Connor Hellebuck, the reigning Vezina winner. You better hope this man rebounds, or you just signed an albatross contract in a flat cap era. In the second round, the Sens will go on to select the likes of Tyler Kleven and goalie Levi Meriläinen, who today both show a lot of promise, which added onto what truly was a legendary draft for the Sens. Other players include Igor Sokolov, Philip Daou, and Eric Engstrand, who really haven't done much for the Sens. But for the next 2 months or so, this is where the positives end. Other than randomly plucking a random Russian defenseman named Artem Zub, who developed into a sturdy top 4 piece for Ottawa, not much news. First was trading assets for the likes of Austin Watson, Josh Brown, and Eric Branson, all who play the same style of game. Big, tough, and not a whole lot of skill. Then came the re-signings. The likes of Nick Paul and Rudolph Balcers, but someone who didn't even get a tender offer was Anthony Duclair, which was and still is baffling. Look, I know he had a rough end to the year, but to not even send him a qualifying offer, thus making him a UFA, why didn't you trade him at the deadline if you didn't plan on keeping him? I know he fired his agent and wanted a long-term deal, which might have thrown you off, but just keep his rights and trade him, or give him a 1-year deal, instead of seeing him sign in Florida and flourishing. Then in free agency, for the first time in over half a decade, the Sens somehow got a big fish, signing Panthers forward Evgeny Dadonov to a 3-year, $5 million a year deal. A consistent 60 to 70 point getter on Florida, someone a veteran who could in theory be the best forward on this team, and someone who could elevate the talents of Batherson, Norris, Kachuk, and Stützle is a good get. I remember seeing this and being genuinely shocked. Someone wanted to come to Ottawa in a flat cap era, especially a Melnyk-led Sens team. It was groundbreaking. Connor Brown and Chris Turner got bridge deals, right call for both, they showed promise, but they were still unknown entities. And then signed a very known nice guy in Alex Galchenyuk. Other than that, nothing else from free agency. But the Sens weren't known for making big splashes, maybe an indicator of things to come. On December 26, a day after Christmas, The Sens make an awful trade, acquiring Derek Stepan, a Stepan who isn't good anymore and was in his 30s, for a second-round pick. Mind you, there were rumors that Stepan was on the market as a cap dump. They paid a second-round pick for him. Stepan at this point is barely a third-line caliber player and has a rough contract as well, but the Sens paid assets to acquire him. Pierre Dorion is not a good pro scout. This entire series is evident on that. The next day, Ottawa do acquire a second-round pick, that's though for taking on the contract of Braden Colburn and Cedric Paquette, so I guess it evens out. We still don't know if we're getting a full NHL season, so here's Stützle tearing apart the World Juniors. He's gonna be so good, oh my god. Finally, we get confirmation on the season. The NHL will break into locked divisions. For our sake, the Sens will play in the Scotia Sponsor Division, the North Division as you might call it, which consists of all the Canadian teams. Jeez, I'll make travel a bitch. They'll play each other about 7 to 9 times a year in a 56-game season. They'll play in almost a best-of-3 series to make travel easier, and 4 teams are allowed to make the playoffs from each division. Though for the Sens, it's gonna be tough to make it when the Leafs and Jets are near lock, and the Oilers have McDavid, thus essentially leaving one open slot between the likes of the Habs, Canucks, and Flames, all teams that made the playoffs the previous year. The Sens, by default, are the worst team in the division. Sucks for them, but let's see if they can prove people wrong. No preseason, so we just jump straight to regular season play. The first line is Brady Tkachuk, Josh Norris, Drake Batherson. The second line is Tim Stützle, Derek Stepan, Evgeny Dadonov. The third line is Nick Paul, Chris Tierney, Connor Brown. And the fourth line is Austin Watson, Artem Anisimov, and Cedric Paquette. With the healthy scratches being Alex Galchenyuk, Philip Schlappick, and Rudolph Balcers, who was waived for some reason. They signed him and waived him. He was decent in the AHL. I don't get the rationale for this. The defense was Thomas Chabot and Nikita Zaitsev. The second pair was Mike Riley and Eric Branson. And the third pair was Braden Colburn and Josh Brown. Artem Zub and Christian Wolanin being healthy scratches. That is certainly a defensive core. My goodness. And the goaltenders were Matt Murray and Marcus Hogberg. No Colin White, he's a healthy scratch, which is weird. I mean, he's not that good, but he's definitely better than the likes of Cedric Paquette and Austin Watson, so I don't get it. The Sens would open their season at home against the Leafs, but after going down 2-1, the Sens would score 4 unanswered goals to take the game 5-3. 3 points from Tkachuk leads away. Maybe I undersold this team. It doesn't have the high-end talent of other teams, but if Norris and Batherson both show first-line capabilities, Murray plays well, Tkachuk becomes a point a game, and Chabot becomes a bona fide number 1, then maybe this team isn't looking that bad. And add on top of the fact of Dadonov, Stützle, and Connor Brown, there's some hope here. You know what? I believe. 9 straight losses. The Sens will lose 13 of the next 14. If it weren't for the Sabres' implosion at this very moment, more people will be talking about Ottawa's absolute terrible start to the season. The problem isn't the core guys, as the leading scorers of this team are Norris and Tkachuk with 8 points and Chabot with 7 points. No, the problem is all the off-season additions have been disasters. Watson is 4th in team scoring with 6 points, which should be an indicator on how this team is going. The likes of Dadonov have struggled greatly. Stepan and Gudbranson have been god-awful. And the worst of all, Matt Murray looks worse than he did in Pittsburgh. Now, the Sens defense isn't good. In fact, it might be the worst in the league if it weren't for Artem Zub all of a sudden becoming a sturdy force. I love you. But Murray has let in some bad goals. And even in games where the Sens had a chance, it was all nullified because Murray couldn't deliver his end of the bargain, and his bargain was huge. He was among the highest paid players in the league as a goalie, and at this point, he was the second highest paid player on the team. The only consistent positive on this team was Nick Paul, who was the only positive plus-minus player on the team, and was developing nicely into a Swiss Army knife of sorts. And other than that, it's been a rough go. Holy, and most of these games have been complete blowouts. The Sens have scored more than 3 goals in a game only twice. Now, like I said earlier, pretty much all of these teams are better than the Sens, which is why they're getting curb stomped. And the coach, DJ Smith, is not helping with ice time deployment. Lightsap, for some reason, even with the emergence of Zub, is still on top pair. The Sens actually have a banger second pair with the likes of Artem Zub and Mike Riley. They don't play that much, as Gudbranson is often the one on the second pair. And the third pair is a mishmash of Colburn, Zub, Wolanin, and Eric Brandstrom. The Sens win a tight game against the Jets where they score a goal in the dying seconds to take the lead. Then on February 15th against the league's best Leafs, yes, league's best Leafs, Marchand go down 5-1 early, great. But then a goal by Nick Paul, then Artem Zub's first career NHL goal on a breakaway, then a goal by Connor Brown on the power play in the last 2 minutes with the goalie pulled, Evgeny Dadonov scores to miraculously tie it up, all level, and in overtime is Dadonov again. The first 4-goal comeback in Sens history, and coming against the Leafs, a Leafs team that is among the league's best, makes it even sweeter. And even sweeter than that, that win might have turned the page on the Sens season, winning 5 of their next 8 games. Pretty average for most teams, but it's a Sens, we'll allow it. The catalysts are the young players taking huge steps. Batherson is now leading the team in scoring with 18 points in 25 games, including a franchise-high 6-game goal streak. Tkachuk, Chabot, and standout rookie Stützle follow, and Josh Norris has taken a big step back from his early season surge, but he's still decent too. Unfortunately, the Sens quote-unquote depth take a hit as Stefan, 20 games into the season, dislocates his shoulder and is done for the year. And his Sens tenure is officially over as he walks in the summer. With one over-the-hill veteran out, it's time to bring a new one in. Both Paquette and Galchenyuk haven't worked out, so let's combine their forces to acquire former Sen Ryan Dzingel. Yes, that's right, he's back. A little worse, but he's back. Okay, maybe not now. He still has to wait 2 weeks to quarantine due to COVID restrictions. Jeez, what a time. Sens fans are more than aware the team stinks, but have no problem rubbing in wins anytime they can. As the Sens sickos start to appear on billboards behind the penalty boxes, even with the cathartic going on, at least we can make fun of the Leafs. Matt Murray during this time isn't any good, and Marcus Hogberg has been significantly worse, so here's Joey Decord, who has somewhat leapfrogged Philip Gustafsson in the depth chart to come in and play back up to Murray. And he doesn't look awful at all, and only giving up 2 goals on 32 shots. Maybe the Sens have something here with Decord, but with the Murray contract, the Sens don't have a choice on who's a netminder for the foreseeable future. For the time being, no matter how bad he is, it's Murray's net to lose. The Sens lose their next 5 games, 3 of which are to Edmonton, a team the Sens haven't beaten yet, and the record stands at 9-20-1. According to Money Puck, the Sens, though not a great team, are being heavily weighed down by their goaltending, with the 4th highest goals against above expected in the league. If the Sens can get average goaltending, the record could be looking a whole lot better. The Sens win a game against the Leafs, no insane comeback, but always nice to beat Toronto. Then after a loss against the Canucks, Joey Decord goes down with an injury, a high ankle sprain. It was because of the short tenure of the season. Even though it's only a 4 to 6 week injury, he's out for the whole year. So here comes rookie goalie Philip Gustafsson to make his NHL debut, and he doesn't look bad at all either. Shootout loss to the Canucks. Not like the Sens are dying for any wins here, so with him and Joey Decord, along with the recent picks of Matt Sogaard, Levi Merlainen, the Sens for the time being have options in net behind Murray. But with the injury to Decord, the Sens need a goalie, as Gus needs to be in the AHL. The Sens will claim goalie Anton Forsberg off of waivers, and in his first game against the Leafs, he played admirably, a loss which kickstarts a stretch of 5 losses in 6 games, which essentially ends their season, or at least any hope for the season. During the stretch was a deadline, and this year it was considerably less drama laden, as the Sens' most valuable assets were the likes of Mike Riley and Eric Branson, which got a 3rd and 7th round pick respectively. The Sens also claimed Habs defenseman Victor Mete from the waivers. I remember being so hyped for this move, man. A speedy, analytical darling, essentially the first time the Sens ever picked up a player like that. I mean, yes, the left side was a little crowded with him, Branstrom, and Chabot, but still, having a guy like that was really fun to watch, even though he couldn't shoot to save his life. The Sens at this point of the season handed the keys to the youngsters, and with the recent bulge signings of Shane Pinto and Jacob Bernard-Darker, the roster was largely comprised of very young and inexperienced youth. Players like Logan Brown, who has struggled a lot, undrafted rookie Parker Kelly, headliner the Matt Duchene trade Vitaly Abramov, and Eric Branstrom were just some of the rookies infused into this roster. An absolutely fair play to the Sens here, as after the trade deadline, the Sens would go on a stretch of 10-3. Now, to be fair, the playoff positioning was all but locked up for the most part, so realistically speaking, most of these teams didn't have anything to play for, and the stress of playing meaningful games was gone, which meant the Sens were able to go out there and just play like a bunch of peewee kids. But this stretch of games was probably the best 14 game stretch the Sens have had since 2017, so the fans will take it. And the Sens didn't even finish bottom of the division either like most expected, as the Canucks took the bottom spot, a team that had a dreadful year with game cancellation and COVID outbreaks along with players underperforming. The Canucks, who were crowned as potential playoff contenders, faltered. The Sens had a really positive end to the year as a whole, but the individual also paints a decently positive story. Brady Tkachuk had essentially the same year as previous with 52 points in an 82-game season, 17 goals, though with minus 17 isn't pretty. Connor Brown had a spectacular year with 21 goals and 35 points while also being a plus player. He actually had an 8-game goal scoring streak that beat out Batherson's record and overall emerged as a true top sixer, which the Sens will take considering the albatross that right now is the Knights have deals looking like. Batherson, Norris, and Suslo all had great rookie years, with Norris leading the way with 35 points, followed by Batherson with 34 and Suslo with 29 as an 18-year-old. Shabbat was okay for his standards. This was his first year, was $8 million year, and yeah, he didn't really play like a top-line player, but I mean, he was literally the only option back there. Nick Paul was a great Swiss Army knife. I've talked about Nick Paul at length this video, and his stats aren't exactly eye-popping, but as a guy who watched this entire 50-game season, especially in the beginning of the year, he was among the Sens' best forwards. And Arm Zub is good. He's good. Players like Brandstrom, who have 13 points in 30 games as a defenseman, and Pinto showed immense promise. And prospects like Jake Sanderson explode on the college scene, being an offensive play driver, which is a fear people had when he didn't really do that in the US NDP program, which now masks a lot of fears that people had for him. But I think we need to have a convo about goaltending. It wasn't good. Anton Forsberg looked okay in his first few games, and Gus and Decor looked solid, but the guy who they're paying the big bucks to in Matt Murray struggled mightily. They need him to play as potential, or it's gonna be a grim time for Ottawa for the next 4 years. You know, the Sens winning is nice, but it's been a while since we've had anything from Eugene Melnyk. Wonder what he's up to. Not much to see. No real commotion, no drunk-filled rants, no quotes, only a rich man temper tantrum. But I mean, from Melnyk standards, that isn't that bad at all. He's still a cheap bastard who has torpedoed the Sens' relationship with the city, but for the time being, it's quite peaceful. Almost too peaceful. A little suspicious. Is everything okay? Unfortunately, even though the Sens winning is nice from a fan perspective, there are some minor consequences. You see, the 2021 draft is very top 9 heavy, with the first 9 picks all being the cream of the crop, and in 2026, they have developed into such so. The likes of Dylan Gunther, Mason McTavish, Simon Edvinsson, and co. were all players the Sens could have selected if it weren't for their end-of-year winning streak. Guess where the Sens picked after the lottery? Yup, 10th overall. So maybe this cute winning streak was actually a losing streak. I don't know. The Sens, before they were able to enter the offseason, had to tackle something that helped jumpstart this entire series, the expansion draft. With Seattle entering the league, the Sens had to once again lose a key piece of the roster. And with the Sens having capable goalies in Murray, Gustafsson, Decord, it made sense when the Kraken selected Joey Decord with their pick. In hindsight, it sucks to lose him, especially when a trade could have easily been reached for him not to be selected. But alas, he is gone. And he's developed into an above average starter in 2026, so it stings even more. The Senators have announced a staff signing. I know it's weird I'm announcing it, but once I tell you the name, you'll understand. Because it's a name you'll never expect. The Ottawa Senators have officially hired Pierre Maguire to be Senior VP of Player Development. I don't know if that's a real title. The real role he'll play is another vote in the tyranny that is a Melnyk-led team. Now, is he exactly fit to help construct a modern NHL lineup? Probably not. I mean, his main hallmark of roster building is a 7-player guideline, which is quite possibly the most obvious tool of measurement any amateur scout or player scout would ever use to build a roster. But he is knowledgeable about the game, has been in the hockey business for decades, and has NHL experience as a head coach. As long as he isn't making any key roster decisions and is just another voice, we'll be fine. And then we find ourselves in the 2021 draft. A little short turnaround, but it is a COVID season, so bear with us. The 2020 draft, if you remember, was spectacular, franchise altering. So with the Sens have themselves a decent stockpile of picks once again, the Sens have an opportunity to repeat the success. I mentioned earlier the Sens aren't able to select the top 9, so with the 10th overall pick, the Ottawa Senators have the option to select.
The Ottawa Senators are proud to select. Les Sénateurs d'Ottawa sont fiers de choisir. From the USA National Team Development Program, Tyler Boucher.
Okay, let's talk about this. Tyler Boucher has the potential to be a very good power forward. a Tom Wilson light. He has skating, the shot, and the hockey pedigree with his dad, but that's beside the point. There is no way in hell Tyler Boucher should have been picked this high. Even ignoring the lack of consensus at this very pick, with a 10th overall pick having about 5 to 10 different prospects in that range, Tyler Boucher was not one of them. He was projected as low as 80th by some scouting outlets, and you pick him at 10. If you like him so much, why not trade down? Or not pick him? Cole Sillinger and Matthew Coronado, who were picked right after, have looked great, and Wyatt Johnson looks like a future #1 center in this league. That's to say this was a terrible draft pick, both with hindsight and at the time. And the little media circus that the scouts took right after, saying that this is not fantasy, this is reality, because they were getting rightfully clowned on, is even more embarrassing. And the rest of the draft wasn't great, selecting the likes of Zach Ostapchuk and Ben Roger in the second round. The latter will be playing in U Sports 3 years later. U Sports! Even if you don't know what U Sports is, there's a high chance your average beer league player can contribute to a U Sports team, so yeah. And those two were selected over the likes of Stankoven and Matthew Nyes. Overall, a complete and utter dud of a draft, which sucks because the year before was sheer brilliance. Ignoring the draft, the Sens would enter the offseason with the goal of adding to the core, along with re-signing 2 members of the core, Batherson and Brady Tkachuk. And with the lack of high-end talent available in free agency, along with a flat cap, teams had to get creative to add some talent. Some restored to sign-in trades with the Oilers with Zach Hyman, and some would survey the buyout market. The Sens did neither. First of all, the Sens would dump off their prize free agent signing, who has been a dud this year, Evgeny Dadonov, to the Vegas Golden Knights. It just never worked out here. The Sens would try putting him with anybody on the Sens team, and it never clicked. And when an opportunity came for the Sens to offload his contract without giving up any picks or prospects, in fact the return was Nick Holden, a 3rd round pick, they took it. This trade looks innocent in nature, just a simple cap dump. But anyways, this innocence of this trade, like a wolf in sheep clothing, will reveal itself very soon. The Sens also signed Michael Del Zotto for some reason. The Sens already had a plethora of left-hand defensemen with Mete, Chabot, Branstrom, and now Holden, so Del Zotto made no sense whatsoever. And it being a 2-year deal made it even weirder. A lot of these moves are even out of the ordinary for Dorian standards, so maybe McGuire does have a say in this. But as the summer and eventually September rolls around, both Batherson and Tkachuk haven't been signed yet. Finally, Batherson does re-sign, beginning of September, a 6-year deal under $5 million a year is actually a steal. Holy shit. Alas, Brady looms large. Pierre Dorion, for some reason, is in front of a microphone. Someone take him away and declares the rebuild is over. Pierre, you do know even with the winning streak at the end of the year, we are still a bottom 5 team, right? Going into training camp, prospect Logan Brown is upset. He asks for a trade, then gets one. Brown just was never able to put it together in Ottawa. Not being able to make the Sens out of camp last year and being relatively mediocre to injury prone in the AHL, it was never going to work out. He gets moved to St. Louis for power forward Zach Sanford, who is just your prototypical body. Just a body. Also, Vitaly Abramov is gone. He's in Russia, so the only piece of the Duchesne trade is Lassie Thompson, who has not impressed so far since being drafted. We're now in training camp and now at the end of preseason, and Tkachuk still hasn't been re-signed. The Sens have even signed Tyler Ennis back, but it's a hole the Sens really can't fill. Even worse news, Colin White got injured in a preseason game with a shoulder injury. He'll be out for the next 4 to 6 months, so the Sens depth gets even worse. But thankfully, on the morning of the Sens home opener, the Sens and Brady Tkachuk have agreed on a contract, a 7-year deal at about $8.2 million a year. A little steep considering it's a flat cap era and Brady has really undeveloped to a 50-point player, but the hope is he grows into this deal and flourishes. He isn't going to play it for a couple of games, but Brady isn't going anywhere, thank God. The Sens lineup for opening night is as follows: Drake Batherson, Eric Branstrom, Connor Brown, Josh Brown, Thomas Chabot, Michael Del Zotto, Tyler Ennis, Alex Formenton, Anton Forsberg, Nick Holden, Parker Kelly, Victor Mete, Matt Murray, Josh North, Nick Paul, Shea Pinto, Scott Scabrins back, Zach Sanford, Logan Shaw, Tim Stützle, Chris Tierney, Nikita Zaitsev, and Artem Zub. The Sens would jump out the gate with 3 first-period goals against the Leafs, and after a late scare from the Leafs in the 3rd period, the Sens hold on and take the game 3-2. First impressions: why is Forsberg in net? Matt Murray was announced like mere moments before puck drop that he was going to be out with something. Okay, I guess. Next, the Sens actually look kind of cohesive. Even without Brady, Stützle has took a very noticeable step, and the likes of Batherson, Norris, and Chabot both all look great. If the Sens can continue this, maybe not playoffs, but definitely a step towards respectability. The Sens lose their next game in Toronto, a slip which isn't bad, although you hope to at least get an OT loss there somewhere. But overall, a very promising start to the year. The Sens would then win their next game against Dallas. A little weird that Chris Tierney is a leading point getter at this point, but whatever. But something the Sens haven't been able to fix, even with the relative positivity to end the year previous year, is their attendance. Obviously the year before was at 0 because COVID, but the Sens this year see crowds in the 8,000s and even flirted with 7,000 in a game against the Stars. I know COVID is a factor and whatnot, but it's gotta get better eventually, right? The Sens lose their next 3 games, including a game against New York with relatively grim refereeing. Also a game where we see Matt Murray, who already has gotten hurt, get injured again. Speaking on injuries, Shane Pinto went down with a shoulder injury. A shame considering he looked pretty respectable as a third line center at this point. But a player who has looked truly great are both Batherson and Norris, hovering at about a point a game, and have looked like the only offensive contributors on the Sens. Batherson notching his first career hat-trick in a failed comeback against the Capitals, and Norris being a pure sniper. These two, along with Tkachuk, are going to form the first line for the rest of the year. Speaking about Brady, he's back with his first game being a 4-1 win in Dallas. The Sens at this very moment are looking like a team that can cause problems. The Sens would immediately lose to the winless, complete tire fire of an organization that is the Chicago Blackhawks. To put into perspective just how much of a joke the Hawks are at this point, the Hawks are currently going through a similar season to the 2018 Sens, with them having no first round picks, while also revealing themselves to be a cancerous organization. And the Sens got blown out by them. That starts a truly horrifying streak of 12 losses in the next 13 games. Even with Brady being made team captain in the middle of the losing streak, it doesn't bode well enough to calm the nerves. At this point, this team is just as bad, if not worse, than the 2019 Sens. During the streak, ironically enough, in their only win against the Penguins, Shane Pinto re-injures his shoulder and is done for the year. So White and Pinto are gone, which means someone needs to play center. The Sens elect to put winger Tim Stützle there, which will change his career forever. Tim Stützle was actually drafted to be a center, but had to play wing because he was god-awful defensively and was not strong enough to be a center. But at this very moment, the Sens have no choice. The injuries also affect the likes of Erik Brannstrom, who breaks his hands out for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Also, during that same LA game, Brady straight up got bit. I mean, I'm not even joking. They got a 5-minute power play out of that and didn't score, which isn't really that shocking to Senators. Also, the Sens are decimated by COVID. Ottawa was the only team last year to not have a single game canceled by COVID, so I guess this is divine retribution because half the players are usually sick or in quarantine, and oftentimes just can't play games. It gets to a point that NHL has to postpone 3 of the games the Sens have because they can't ice an NHL roster at this very moment. So yes, losing, it continues, but the team you see losing isn't a team of full strength at all. The Sens have to march into the reigning The Sens are losing 8-1 against the Avalanche. Little break from production here. I just want the world to know that. It's the second period, by the way. The Sens have to march into the reigning President's Trophy winning Hurricanes, and by some godforsaken miracle, scrape by a win by the skin of their teeth, largely led by Anton Forsberg, who at this point has taken the horns as a starter and looks quite good, surprisingly. And with Matt Murray going down with an injury again, and the Sens making a controversial decision to waive him, it's Anton's net now. But more on Matt Murray. He's been a disaster this year. Even the glimpse of potential, it's all undone with reoccurring injuries throughout. Before Brady got his deal, Murray was the second highest paid player on the team. And what's he shown so far? It hadn't shown once. And so far, it's been a cataclysmic disaster. But following that, wins in 4 of the next 5 games. All of a sudden, this team is not only looking NHL caliber, but great too, beating teams like the Avalanche, the Lightning, and absolutely curb stomping the Panthers on the road 8-2. That is the cup winning team, the defending cup winning team, and the team that lose their cup winning team, and the President's Trophy winner Panthers. Though that Colorado game saw them blow a 3-goal third period lead, and the Sens are in some cases being outplayed considerably as they pretty much display bomb 10 metrics in most 5v5 stats, but whatever. The Sens are watchable and relatively full in strength as the COVID outbreak has now subsided for now. Drake Batherson has not only arrived as the Sens best player at this moment, but he is an elite player league-wide with 28 points, just 21 games, and a +7. And with that contract, it's looking like a complete bargain. Along with his line mates, Josh Norris has 14 goals, and Braykochuk, who is just sitting under a point in game, all make up the Sens top line, who all of which are positive plus-minus players. Connor Brown also continuing his Middlesex play, only 4 goals though, with 16 points and a great 5v5 metric. The concerning one here is Stützle. He struggled. With him being the odd man out on the first line, he's been tasked with second line duties with Connor Brown and Alex Formenton, along with a rotating cast of Nick Paul and Tyler Ennis. Fine players, but not players that are offensively gifted enough to play with a Stützle type player. But as of late, with him making the change to become a center full time, it's changed everything. Stützle was drafted as a natural center, but his whole defensive play negated any chance of him being stuck there full time. But with all the injuries, and Chris Tierney being an absolute pumpkin as of late, the only other option is to try Stützle as a center, and it's worked so far. But the killer for the Sens though is the defense, which other than Chabot and Zub, who don't play with each other for some reason, it's a complete and utter terrifier. Delzato, Mete, Zaitsev, and either are not good enough or complete disasters, and JBD and Brandstrom have not taken the steps the Sens brass have been hoping for. Oftentimes, when they win, it's because of Anton Forsberg and the top line. And speaking on goaltending, not only has Murray struggled, but the once hyped goalie prospect Phil Gustafsson has as well. He's not been good. In fact, he's been worse than all 3 of them. He's been at times worse than Murray, which really puts a wrench into the Sens goalie prospect pool. The Sens lose their next 2 games, including an OT loss against the Flyers, where Claude Giroux scored for Philly. Man, he's so good. Imagine him in a Sens uniform. Then the league pauses the season as COVID has completely taken over most of the NHL. I mean, teams like Calgary literally can't play NHL games at this moment. Matt Murray during this time has been recalled, which is for the best, as Gustafsson just looks overmatched. Even though the Sens are still able to play all the games, COVID has struck the players down yet again, as a whopping 9 skaters have entered COVID protocol. And with that, in the return to action, the Senators get dismantled badly by the Leafs with no fans. In fact, for the next month or so, no team in Ontario are gonna play with any fans in attendance. Right back to the pain of last year, I guess. Then the injuries just start piling up. In the next game against the Flames, Connor Brown takes a puck to the jaw. He was fine, he even had a goal and assist after that. But after the game, it's announced he'll be out week to week with a broken jaw. On January 14th, it's announced that Drake Batherson will be a Sens All-Star representative. Beyond deserved. He's been far and away the Sens' best player. But honestly, I want to shine the light on Josh Norris for a bit. He's been fantastic this year. Defensively solid, and is on pace for 42 goals as a sophomore. Along with elevating himself as a true #1 center, yes, he may be shooting at 17%, but the future is looking quite bright with him establishing himself as a 1C. Praise also goes to Braykochuk. He's always been a decent point guard, but this year, along with physical play, he's evolved into a first-line caliber player. With 23 points in 27 games, the now captain Braykochuk is the entire entity of Ottawa. The Sens come back in the third against the Oilers, this comeback being memorable as it's the first third period comeback of any game since at least 5-1 win, and will still be until 2023. That's a very shocking stat. Then lose against the Sabres, where the game-winning goal was scored on a one-on-one. Then lose in Pittsburgh, where they nearly came back down 5-1, all setting up a showdown against those very same Sabres at home. In revenge of sorts. This should be an inconsequential game. The Sens would take it 5-0 with 0 fans, so in theory it kinda is, but it isn't, sadly.
Injury, which they're calling long-term. He's gonna miss next week's All-Star game after that collision with Sabres goalie Arundel. Sneaky little shoulder right there. The Sens didn't like it one bit. Here's their post-game.
There is no reason for Arundel to make this hit. Goalies have almost an angelical halo around them, where they are protected no matter what. Most goalies follow the grace they're given and play within the compounds of their area. Dell doesn't. He has a history of this, hitting former Sen Mark Stone against Vegas in a similar manner. Drake Batherson is not a dirty player. There isn't really a reason for Dell to give him that hit. Batherson will be out for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Will miss the All-Star festivities, and the Sens lose their best player to an injury, a high ankle sprain. Probably the worst injury a player could have that isn't major. Injuries like a broken foot or ankle can be healed through injury and rehab, but a high ankle sprain can't. Batherson, even after his return, will not be the same. It'll take a year, according to him, to play to his maximum level, and for that, Dell gets a measly 3-game suspension. Then in the very next game against Carolina, Josh Norris goes down after he loses body possession against Andrei Svechnikov, falling awkwardly into the boards. It's his shoulder that gets the brunt, and he too will be out for a long period of time. So in a 2-game span, the Sens lose their 2 leading scorers. It's sad, man. The Sens aren't really any good, but that top line was legitimately NHL caliber. The analytics aren't really pretty. In fact, with lines with over 330 minutes played, they're second last in expected goals for percentage at 46.8%. But watching them play and all three having different skill sets, it almost made you remind you of the pizza line. But alas, the Sens have a season to play, and even though it may seem like it's over now, the Sens need to trot out. Connor Brown is back at least, so the top 6 gets a massive boost. Though a loss against the Ducks with a lack of offense is definitely present is felt. The OT win against Edmonton, where Tim Stützle scored the OT winner, is nice. Against 50 fans though, not even hyperbole, it was 50 fans. The Sens are also seeming to change their lineup ideologies. With Del Zotto, Dylan Belleville, it's guys like Igor Sokolov, Mark Kastlik, and recent waiver claim pickup Adam Gaudette getting promoted minutes. Not the most threatening group, but fresh faces, so it's nice. The Sens lose 1, then 2, then lose 2, then proceed to win just 3 of the next 11 games. Both Colin White and Josh Norris do return to the lineup, and White scores in his first game back, which finally gives Stützle some much needed center depth behind him, but it's too late. The Sens de facto second line when healthy is Stützle, Connor Brown, and rookie speedster Alex Formenton. And even though those two aren't exactly elite offensively, they complement each other quite well. With Formenton quick enough to catch up to Stützle's offensive wizardry, and Brown being a relentless forechecker, that lineup finished the season with a goals percentage of 53.5%. Not bad at all. Also, Matt Murray, since coming back from Belleville, has been great since being waived, possessing a .912 save percentage in 14 games. But Anton Forsberg has been even better with a mind-boggling .932 save percentage. It's weird as the Sens goaltending has kind of fallen off the radar with the losing, but it's them carrying them at times. But Murray, once again, even when he's good, goes down with an injury again. Matt Murray is such an enigma. People don't realize, but when he played, he wasn't half bad as a Senator. He was honestly a decent player, and someone who could have been the starter, but it's the injuries. He can't stay healthy, and with the cap hit he possesses, it just isn't feasible with him. Trade deadline approaching, the Sens have a few decisions to make on some players, mainly Nick Paul and the aforementioned Anton Forsberg. The idea of trading Forsberg would be sell high on an asset, with many teams being hungry for goalie hope. Forsberg would fetch an okay amount, but with Murray injured and Gustafsson not taking that next step, moving off of him doesn't really make sense, so they elect to keep him, signing him to a 3-year deal at a very respectable cap hit. Nick Paul though is a different story. Though his offense has stayed relatively the same from last year, he's developed into a great defensive player, a big body, and someone who could play a top 6 in a pinch. Now the issue is that Nick Paul wants both term and AAV, something that Dorian isn't comfortable with. It's not like Paul is a bona fide point getter. His career high in points to this point is 20 points. And the risk is there if Nick Paul doesn't develop his offensive game. For now, the Sens are on the trade Nick Paul train, and these last few games may be the last we see of him as a Senator. Ottawa will win the next 2 games in Josh Norris stand-up performances. He's probably the Sens' best player now, and him and Stützle have developed into a true 1-2 punch down the middle. His offensive gaffes that he's had in 2021 seem to be gone, and Stützle, having the center ice to himself, has truly unlocked his offensive prowess. Then 3 straight losses to the likes of the Coyotes, Blackhawks, and Blue Jackets. All 3 teams will miss the playoffs, and 2 of them are actively tanking, while the Hawks don't have their own pick. Then Chabot breaks his hand and will be out pretty much the entire season, though for some reason ends up returning early. Don't know the rationale of that, but for now the Sens don't have any NHL caliber players on defense other than Zub and maybe Brandstrom. The deadline is here, and as expected, Nick Paul is gone. He's off to Tampa for a young speedster in Matthew Joseph and a 4th round pick. Joseph is similar to Pedigree, and a bomb sixer that has trouble finishing, but with a different playstyle. Matthew Joseph is similar to style to the Sens' Alex Formenton, a true running mate, a speedster that just can't score at this point, and with Tampa stacked talent in the top 6, Joseph, especially with the acquisition of Hagel, wasn't getting any opportunity. But here in Ottawa, there was plenty of opportunity to showcase himself as a top 6er. He's young and can grow with the core, and the Sens are banking on Joseph progressing as an offensive player. Tampa does re-sign Nick Paul, at the contract he wants. 7 years, Jesus. Then the Sens make a move. That's all I can say. Trading a 3rd round pick to the Vancouver Canucks for defenseman Travis Hamonic, a player who 4 months ago was on waivers. The rationale being that the Sens didn't have a 4th round pick, so instead of just not trading for Hamonic, they gave a 3rd round pick. Hamonic isn't good and is under contract for a year after this. What's the idea here? More bodies? You have Michael Delzal in the AHL, just call him up. You need a righty. You have Lassie Thompson and JBD, who has played games in NHL so far this year and haven't looked dreadful. Like Hamonic's analytics will indicate, he is awful. There is no sound reason for this trade to happen. Not only for him to be in the position he is, but for a 3rd round pick. Why? Pound for pound, this might be the worst trade in the Dorian era. Maybe with Derek Stepan. Just an awful trade. The Sens after deadline don't play great but just are okay. 2 losses to 2 bad teams in the Habs and Islanders, then crushing the Jets' playoff hopes in a game where Matthew Joseph really showcases himself, then blow a 3-goal 3rd period lead to the President's Trophy winning stacked Panthers team. They have Giroux. Once again, he would be awesome in a Sens uniform. They're a good team, but come on guys. This game would be the highest attended game that didn't include Leafs or Habs for the whole season. That's sad. But this video seems to be ending pretty soon, and you may be wondering why. This season isn't done, and the rebuild currently certainly isn't close to being ending. Well, there's a reason. The Sens for the past 15 or so years have had a dark cloud hang over their heads. One that looms large even in the winds. There's always seems to be some rain. Well, that cloud is now clearing up. Melnyk's dead. It's a new era in Ottawa.